Hello everybody and welcome back. This is the third video in a series that I'm doing that are aimed at those of you woodworkers out there that are wondering if it's worth the money and how much money is worth investing in hand planes. In the first video I gave you an argument why I think cheap used hand planes might be a good fit for you. And in the second video I compared a few of those secondary hand plane lines to the famous Stanley Bailey. So here's a quick rundown of all the features we kind of touched on with the Stanley Baileys of the Type 15 era. And I just want to be really clear, if you're looking at a hand plane that maybe doesn't have some of these, in fact even a hand plane that doesn't have any of these features, it could still turn out to be a very nice hand plane. And in this video I'm just going to continue that with a few more of the hand planes like the ones you see here. So let's get into it. And this is one of the lowest quality planes in my shop. I also have some videos on the restoration of this guy. But it is an everyday user. This is a great neck, and I picked this up for about the price of a Big Mac. The hardware is steel. The furniture is hardwood. I stained this one to get it this color. I think it originally came this clown red color. I have some videos on it that detail it. If you look at the tote, you'll see at the top it looks a little bit shorter. You don't really have the full-size horn, and there's certainly a noticeable flat spot where the stain didn't accept quite as well as the rounded over areas. The depth adjustment knob is small and brass. It does, curiously, have the frog adjustment mechanism in it. The lever cap has the spring on it, which is a nice touch. I think this may have also been nickel plated, and the chip breaker also seems to be nickel plated, which is a curiously nice touch. However, if you look at this carefully, you'll see that the lateral adjuster, the pivot point on it, is not in alignment with the center of the plane. So whoever machined this to drill that hole missed, and I think a better quality assurance would have rejected this plane. So to use this plane, the lateral adjust is always kinked a little bit. And there you can see the Y-yoke is two-piece laminate. And finally, it's probably not gonna come out well on the camera, but just as the center pin for the lateral adjust was off center, so was the hole that holds the frog adjustment mechanism in place. So this tab that's coming off the screw has actually been filed and fit a little bit off center to make the whole thing work. The frog has a slot in it to key it, but it doesn't seem to be engaging the actual frog seat. Kind of curious. So all in all, I'd say this is a pretty low quality hand plane, but with enough TLC and a little know-how, it can still be turned into a competent user. So here's my roll-up of the features for the Great Neck. I'm not sure if it has Japanning or not. I tend to think not, but I can't really tell. And for other intangible, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. Because two of the screw holes were drilled off-center, I would put it at very low quality. Yet it seems as though parts of the plane are nickel plated, which would give it a little bit of a boost. So a bit of an odd combination. But even with all this going on, it's still a competent user in my workshop. I found this plane in the junk pile at a flea market, and I purchased it for about the price of a Big Mac. And it says on the lever cap, Sergeant VBM, which I recognized as certainly a competent brand. And I was excited to buy it, especially for the price. If you look at the knob and the tote, they seem to be made of rosewood, and this handle here, the tote, again, there's not a flat surface to be found on it. Very nice. Depth adjustment knob is small. There's no frog adjustment mechanism. I still can't get the lever cap off. I haven't started working on this yet. So I purchased this plane simply looking at it from that point of view. And again, it was the price that made this very attractive. So these two planes are Vaughn and Bushnell, and this one I picked up at an online auction for about the price of 1.5 or maybe 2 Big Macs. This one I wanted. This is a 900 series, and I went out of my way to buy this one from a dealer, so I paid market price maybe and then some. I splurged a little bit on my own. This is an 804 800 series, and this is the 905, the 900 series. The 800 series is their lowest end plane, and we'll get into the details of that in a minute. And the 900 is their highest line of planes. And what's unique and cool about the 900 series planes is that this body is not cast iron, it's actually drop forged. And it says drop forged on it. And there's a close-up of the lettering. The 800 series here, it's either a really bad paint job or perhaps it's Japan. You can see a lot of dimpling in the finish, which might be an indication of Japanning. However, on the 900 series, that just looks way too smooth and doesn't look nearly thick enough to be Japanning, but I wouldn't guarantee either of those conclusions. So looking at the 804 first, cursory view, the nuts on it are made of brass, and the depth adjustment nut is large and made of brass, and it also down there has the frog adjustment mechanism. So seems to be checking all the boxes so far. If we take off the lever cap, it has a spring tab on it, and the iron and chip breaker, as always, look fairly normal. This says 804 on it, which was what helped me identify this plane, and it also has a Vaughn and Bushnell trademark on the iron. I actually went out and purchased this iron separately. Vaughn and Bushnell markets their planes as being comparable to the bedrock planes. So although these may not look very trick, they're actually sitting on a flat machined surface that mate to each other. The lateral adjust is nothing exceptional. And the 905 here is pretty much the same story. The nuts are made of brass. The depth adjust is large, made of brass. The Y yoke is cast. There is a frog adjustment mechanism screw back there. There's a spring tab on the lever cap. And the iron and chip breaker look fairly ordinary. Trademark, of course, on the iron. And we're back to a very similar frog and lateral adjust. Looks like the wood is a nice, deep, rich brown. According to the research I've done, this is actually walnut and not rosewood, but certainly a nice, durable, attractive, somewhat exotic wood. And you can see the tote has a very nice shape to it. Really no flats on it. Very well finished. And the 905 is very similar, but curiously about the tote, it's a little extra thick. I mean, that's a pretty beefy tote compared to the Stanley Baileys. Everything is a gentle transition from one surface to another. And a nice beefy horn at the top. So again, very well made. So here's my feature roll-up of the Vaughn and Bushnell. This is both of them. I'm not sure about the Japanning, but they basically check all the boxes except for the fancy lateral adjust. These are clearly decent looking planes on the surface, and I know my 804 has been a great user in my shop. I give other intangible quality to the 905. It has a particularly attractive lever cap, and the body is drop forged, so kudos on those two. Here's a Miller's Falls 814. I think this was manufactured during the great decline of American hand planes. I think I paid more for this guy than it was probably worth. I had read that Miller's Falls were a good brand name, and when I saw this, I just purchased it. And I seem to remember I paid in the vicinity of around 6 Big Macs for this guy. Again, not a ridiculous price, but probably a little more than it's really worth. The hardware holding the knob and the tote on are made of steel. If you look at the tote, it's clearly nothing that somebody spent a lot of time on. There's a pretty good flat on the side, and it looks like it was simply routed. Not much of a horn on it. Depth adjustment wheel is nice and big and solid steel, and there is no frog adjustment mechanism back here. I have a video. I nickel plated the lever caps, and the iron actually is a little small for a modern hand plane. And the frog seat, it does have a keying mechanism, but this frog has to be very carefully aligned. And try to, there's a little bit of play in there, and look at all the play in there. So all in all, this is a pretty low quality plane, but it is one of my favorite users, and like all the others, for the right price, this can be made into a nice tool. And here's how my Miller's Falls 814 stacks up on my quality list. It basically has none of them. For the logo trademarks, it does have a little bit of stenciling on the tote, but I'm not really sure that qualifies. And it does have Made in the USA embossed in the body, but it has nothing else. And yet, even with all this lacking of what a Stanley Bailey has, this is still a plane that I use often in my workshop. This is a Miller's Falls number 9, which is analogous to the Stanley Bailey's number 4s. And like so many of my other planes, this was had for about a 2, maybe a 3 Big Mac price. This particular one is a World War II or just after World War II vintage. The hardware holding on the knob and the tote are actually made of steel. The knob and the tote, they seem to be an exotic wood. I've read that this is not rosewood, but perhaps cocobolo. The depth adjustment nut is made of brass, and the Y-yoke adjuster is laminated, and you can see it looks like it may have had nickel plating on it that's starting to come off. There is a frog adjustment screw mechanism in it. Cool thing about these Miller's Falls is that the lever cap is actually a 2-piece front leading edge of it has a hinge on it, and it gives you a slightly different way that the lever cap holds down the iron and the chip breaker. Chip breaker appears to be nickel plated, a nice touch. There is a trademark on the iron, but very difficult to read until this has been cleaned. The lateral adjust lever does have the wheel on it. It looks like it too was once nickel plated, and that has failed. And the frog seems to sit into a rib on the body of the plane. It's too dirty. I can't tell if the body is japanned or painted. Obviously the frog being red, that's painted. And here's my feature roll-up of this Miller's Falls number 9. Checks a lot of the boxes. Again, not too sure about the japanning. It does not have brass because it was a World War II vintage. They do not use the cast yoke. They use the laminated steel design. And the lateral adjust does have the wheel on it and other intangible qualities. It has an especially fancy lever cap design, and there is nickel plating in areas where other planes don't have it. So all in all, these types of Miller's Falls planes are known to be good planes. So this is a good opportunity to compare two Miller's Falls, but this one, as you can see, checks pretty much none of the boxes you might be looking for and is not known to be a very high quality hand plane. Yet this guy is in my shop, and certainly one of the hand planes I don't hesitate reaching for when I need to do some work. This number 9, on the other hand, World War II vintage, is known to be a pretty good quality hand plane, and you can see it checks most of the boxes. And a plane like this certainly would command a bit of a premium price over a plane like this. And I'm sure, since this guy works well, when I get around to tuning up this guy here, he'll be a fine user as well. This is my Defiance 1204. This was one of the first hand planes that was an addition to my shop. I got this at a flea market and probably paid too much for it. This was a 3 or 4 Big Mac price tag. To run through the features, the nuts are made of brass. Depth adjustment knob is steel and small. The tote is a decent shape, but you can see there are healthy flats on it and a rather sharp transition from the sides to the rounded areas. The Y adjustment yoke is cast. If I had to guess, I think the paint on it is paint and not japanning. Where it's chipping in there, it looks particularly thin. The lever cap does not have a tab on it. Chip breaker is ordinary, and the iron does have a trademark on it. Looks like the leading edge of the frog is chowdered up a little bit. There's no central rib to help locate the frog, and there is no frog adjustment screw down there. The lateral adjust lever, again, just a simple piece of stamped steel. It's certainly not exotic wood. I have refinished this. It was a very blonde wood, and I took some time to try to stain it to look a little bit more like a mahogany or a rosewood. And here's the feature roll-up. But as I've been saying all along, even though this plane screams mediocrity, when you look at it, it can be turned into a very useful tool in your workshop. Well, this video is getting kind of long, but that's okay because I'm kind of running out of hand planes to talk about. If you've made it this far into the video, I thank you for that. And if you haven't seen the first 2 videos in this series, please take a few minutes to check those out. I'm sure you'll get something out of it. To reiterate the point one final time, if you think hand planes might be a useful addition to your shop, but you don't want to outlay the big ticket cash up front, I can't emphasize enough, I think it's worth your time to go find a competent used hand plane, a decent model. Take the time to tune it up, get the iron sharp, and I'm sure you're going to end up with a useful and enjoyable tool in your workshop. So as always, stay safe, take care, keep your eyes out for the next one. Thanks for stopping by.